It smelled of freshly cut grass and something else, something sweet, slightly decayed, like autumn leaves forgotten under the rain. I turned off the ignition, and the engine fell silent with a dull sigh. Inside the car, music still played, a quiet, haunting melody without words, filling the silence better than any conversation ever could. Max leaned back in his seat and listened. Quiet like the calm before a storm, he said. I smirked. Or like the calm before bad news. In small towns like Hayville, the music always seemed to know a little more than you'd like. We stepped out of the car. The soft light of late morning spilled across perfectly manicured lawns. Every house looked like it belonged in a magazine. White shutters, wicker swings on porches, neatly trimmed bushes. And yet, something felt off, too perfect, too calculated, like a stage set for the first act of a tragedy. Mrs. Hunter's mansion stood out only by its size, a large Victorian-style house with a turret that surely held childhood fears. The garden around it stretched over half an acre, blooming flower beds, rose-lined paths, sprawling lavender bushes. The garden looked alive, too alive. Beautiful, Max muttered, reserved, almost strangely beautiful. A garden always says more than its owner, I replied. A tall, lanky man in a gray suit waited for us on the steps. Detective Riley, I'm Peter Alden, Mrs. Hunter's lawyer. Thank you for coming so quickly. We shook hands. A gardener turned heiress of a fortune, I said. Sounds like the start of a good novel or a bad will. Peter Alden gave a strained smile. Miriam Hunter was a respected woman, and her death raises questions. Officially, it was an accident, a fall in the garden, but Miss Catherine Hunter, her niece, thought otherwise. We entered the house. The floors creaked underfoot, and the air smelled of polished wood and something elsey faint trace of lavender. The music from the car still played in my head, quiet, melancholic, trailing behind me like a memory. The living room was spacious, a fireplace, armchairs, an antique piano against the wall. Photographs lined the walls. Miriam through the years, with flowers, with books, alone. We found her yesterday morning, Alden said. She fell on the path by the rose bushes. Her head hit a stone. I nodded. And no one noticed anything unusual? Only, he hesitated, only strange things in the garden. Max raised an eyebrow. Strange things? Alden looked out the window. Before her death, Mrs. Hunter often spoke of a final planting. No one understood what she meant. I glanced out the window. Beyond the glass lay the Gardena labyrinth of paths, blooming alleys, and hidden corners. Somewhere out there, among that beauty, something was waiting for us. Something she had planted, and now we had to find out what it was. The garden began where the view from the house's windows ended. At first glance, it seemed ordinary. A riot of roses, lilacs along the paths, tall hydrangea bushes. But a few steps in, and a feeling crept in, as if every branch, every turn of the path had been meticulously planned. Beautiful, Max muttered again, and oddly organized, like a life where every step comes at a price, I observed. We walked slowly down the path. Gravel crunched underfoot. Then I noticed something. At the edge of the path stood a small sign nailed to a wooden post. Forgiveness. Max leaned closer. What a strange habit naming flower beds after feelings. Sometimes a garden is a confession, I said. Further along there were more signs. Betrayal, oblivion, faith. Each path led to its own alley. It seemed Miriam hadn't designed the garden for beauty alone, but to leave behind a map. And perhaps a clue. We turned down the path marked Betrayal. Thorny bushes grew there, as if trying to hold back anyone daring to pass. Among them stood crimson roses, vivid, aggressive, like blood on a white shirt. I crouched by one of the flower beds. Something glinted in the soil. Carefully, with 2 fingers, I pulled out a thin chain with a small pendant. The pendant was open, revealing a tiny photograph inside. A woman in her 30s with dark hair. "Who's this?" Max asked. I pondered. Looks like someone Miriam considered her betrayal, or her painful memory. Footsteps rustled behind the bushes. We turned. A young woman, about 25, approached us slender, with piercing steel gray eyes. She clutched a thin leather folder in her hands. "Are you Alex Riley?" she asked. I nodded. "Catherine Hunter," she introduced herself. "I'm the one who called you. I need you to find who killed my aunt." Her voice was firm, too firm for someone who had just lost a loved one. I narrowed my eyes. "Tell me, Miss Hunter," I said, "what exactly is growing in this garden alongside the flowers?" She flinched, almost imperceptibly, and I knew there was more than one secret buried in this garden, and perhaps more than one death. We settled in the living room, where everything seemed too neat, as if someone had tried to preserve the illusion of a perfect life, even when life itself had long faded. Catherine sat across from me, gripping the folder tightly, as if it were her last shield against the world. "Tell me everything from the beginning," I said calmly. She nodded, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "My aunt was always strange, the last few months especially so. She kept talking about a final planting, writing notes. The garden became an obsession for her." I watched her eyes. They darted, searching for a place to rest. "When did you last see her alive?" "The day before yesterday. I stopped by to drop off groceries. She was in the garden, working with the roses." "And how did she seem?" "Tired and scared, though she tried to hide it." Max sat in the corner, taking notes. His face remained neutral, but I knew he caught the tremble in Catherine's voice, just as I did. "Who else had access to the house?" I asked. "Only Dr. Brooks and Sarah, her companion. Oh, and the gardener, but he only comes on Fridays." "And who was here the day she died?" Catherine slowly shook her head. "I and Sarah. Dr. Brooks came later, after she was found." I leaned back in the chair. "You found her?" She swallowed hard. "Number Sarah did." A faint crack. The first fissure in her story. "But you were here that day." "Yes, but I left in the morning. Sarah stayed." I stood and walked to the window. The garden stretched out before me, a green sea with islands of crimson roses. "How well did you know Sarah?" I asked, without turning around. "Well enough. She worked for my aunt for the last 2 years, lived here in a room upstairs." I turned back. "And who do you think might have wanted your aunt dead?" Catherine lowered her eyes. "She had enemies, people she once refused to help, family disputes, money. And the garden," I added softly. She flinched. I paused. "Catherine," I said gently, "sometimes, to understand who killed, you need to understand what they wanted to grow in place of what they destroyed." Silence was her reply. But in that silence, I heard the most important thing. Catherine was afraid. Not for her aunt, for herself. And the garden was only the beginning of this story. The garden breathed in the evening light. Shadows from tall bushes stretched across the paths like fingers reaching for something sacred. I walked slowly along the flower beds, trying to sense the logic of this labyrinth. Max trailed behind, occasionally stopping to snap photos of the signs. "You know," he said, catching up to me, "I used to think the weirdest things in gardens were gnomes. Now there's this." I chuckled. Gnomes are at least honest. They smile even when you're not looking. We reached a new alley. The sign at the entrance read, "Guilt." The path led to a neglected part of the garden. Here, the flowers were wild, the bushes overgrown, the soil damp and heavy. I slowed my pace. There were tracks in the ground, not just human footprints, shallow pits as if someone had tried to bury something or dig it up. I knelt by one of the pits. The soil was loose, fresh. Max grabbed the gloves from the car. Max nodded and jogged back. I carefully cleared the edge of the pit with my hands. Something glinted. When Max returned, I put on the gloves and gently pulled out the find. It was a medallion, oval, with a worn design on the lid. I opened it. Inside were two portraits. On the left, Miriam, young, laughing. On the right, a man in his 30s, with sharp features. "Who's this?" Max asked, peering over my shoulder. "We'll find out," I replied. I stood and scanned the garden. Nothing here was random. The pits, the signs, the labyrinth, it was all someone's confession. Someone's attempt to leave a message. "Why hide it here?" Max asked. I thought for a moment, maybe so someone else would find it someday, or so no one ever would. Max looked at the medallion, and that someone is us now. I nodded. "Yes, Max, now it's us." In the distance, among dense bushes, I noticed another sign, half hidden by foliage. I read the inscription aloud, "Truth," and I knew. The most interesting part was yet to come. The next morning, we returned to the garden. The sun lazily broke through the clouds, illuminating the grass, still wet with dew. Everything seemed peaceful if you didn't know that somewhere beneath this soil lay not just memories, but a motive for murder. We headed straight for the truth sign. Beneath it, a narrow path wound between tall bushes. It was quieter here, as if the air itself feared disturbing the secrets. "Why do you think Mrs. Hunter created such a strange garden?" Max asked, walking just behind me. I ran my fingers over the rough surface of the sign. "Some people keep diaries, some burn letters, others grow their confessions." The path led us to a small circular clearing hidden among the overgrowth. At the center stood a stone birdbath, long since dried up. On the edge of the bath another glint. I stepped closer. A small silver brooch in the shape of a lily lay on the stone. I picked it up with gloved hands. "What does it mean?" Max asked. I pondered. A lily symbol of purity, or forgiveness. Maybe it's a sign for someone who knew where to look. We returned to the house. Catherine was waiting in the living room, looking like she hadn't slept all night. I placed the medallion and brooch on the table in front of her. "Do you recognize these people?" I asked, nodding at the photos in the medallion. Catherine paled. That's Jonathan, my aunt's brother. He disappeared years ago. They said he left after a fight with her." "Are you sure he left?" She lowered her head. "No." I watched her closely. "Catherine, what else aren't you telling me?" She clenched her fists so hard her knuckles turned white. "My aunt, she sometimes said, the garden remembers everything, that no matter what you try to hide, It'll grow back eventually. Max exchanged a look with me. I stood. Then it's time to dig deeper. Because if something was growing in this garden besides flowers, we were going to find it. And the truth, we'd pull it up by the roots. We returned to the garden in the early evening as the sun dipped behind the treetops, casting everything in a golden gray haze. It smelled of damp earth, wilted flowers, and something else, something heavy, almost tangible. Max carried 2 shovels he'd found in the shed. I led the way down the truth path, scanning the garden again and again, as if trying to hear its breath. "Are you sure we should dig?" Max asked. I nodded. Miriam left us a map, and if someone buried the truth here, she showed us where to look. We stopped at the circular clearing with the stone bird bath. Dense rosehip bushes grew here, and beneath them, the ground seemed slightly sunken, as if someone had once disturbed it and hastily covered it back up. I drove the shovel into the soil. The earth gave way softly, too softly, for an old, well-trodden garden. We dug in silence. Only the sound of scraping dirt broke the stillness. 10 minutes in, Max's shovel hit something hard. He froze. I dropped to my knees, carefully clearing the spot with my hands. The corner of an old wooden box emerged, damp, blackened with age. I glanced at Max. He nodded silently. Together, we pulled the box to the surface. It was heavy, very heavy. I removed a glove and ran my fingers over the lid. The wood was brittle, but the hinges still held. With a single tug, I opened the box. Max recoiled. Inside were human remains of skeleton in tattered clothing. Around the neck hung a tarnished medallion, identical to the one we'd found among the bushes. The silence around us thickened. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I stood slowly. "Jonathan," I said. Max swallowed hard. "You're sure?" I nodded. Miriam knew. She was trying to tell us. Not with words. The garden was her cry for help. We returned to the house. Catherine was waiting in the living room, nervously clutching a handkerchief. When I told her about the discovery, she covered her face with her hands. "I knew," she whispered. "Deep down, I knew." "Who else knew?" I asked gently. She lifted her tear-filled, frightened eyes to mine. "Sarah. She worked for my aunt, but often argued with her. She said my aunt carried other people's sins. I overheard them once. Sarah shouted that if the truth came out, they'd both lose everything." Max scribbled down every word. "Who's they?" I asked. Catherine hesitated. "Dr. Brooks. He was Jonathan's friend. Rumor had it they had a shady business together, money, land." I looked out the window, where the garden now seemed not beautiful, but menacing. Miriam had tried to protect someone's sin, or someone's weakness, and in the end, it cost her her life. Late that evening, I went back to the garden alone. I stood in the middle of the path, where the truth sign swayed in the breeze. The wind whispered through the leaves, "Don't bury what will grow back one day." And I knew, no matter what lies tried to hide beneath layers of earth, the truth would always find its way to the light. Sometimes too late, but it would always find a way. Sarah Miller was at the porch of a small rented house at the end of the street Modest, with peeling paint on the steps and a pot of wilting petunias by the door. She greeted us with her arms crossed, her face pale, lips pressed into a thin line. I greeted her politely, without pressure. Max stood slightly to the side, blocking any potential escape route if she decided to run. "Sit down, Miss Miller," I said. "Let's talk." She sat on a creaky chair across from me. Her eyes darted between Max, me, and the distance where the sun was setting. "Tell me about Mrs. Hunter's last day," I began calmly. "She was distracted, strange, spent a lot of time in the garden, spoke in riddles." Sarah shrugged. "I tried to help, but she wouldn't let anyone near her." I nodded. "You said you found her body?" Sarah nodded. "Yes. I went out to the garden after lunch, saw her lying by the roses." "And what did you do?" "Ran back to the house, called an ambulance, called Catherine. I pretended to jot down notes." "And did you notice the medallion then?" Sarah flinched, almost instinctively. "The medallion? No, I didn't look." Max caught my eye a brief signal. He'd noticed the inconsistency. I continued. "Strange, because when we found the medallion, it was buried deep in the ground, and you couldn't have seen it unless you already knew about it." Sarah paled. Her voice broke. "It was a mistake, just a slip of the tongue." I leaned forward. "Tell me the truth, Miss Miller. What are you hiding?" For a moment she was silent. Then she lowered her head, clenching her fingers until her knuckles turned white. "It was Dr. Brooks," she whispered. "He came that day, right before Mrs. Hunter's death." Max tensed. "Why didn't you mention that earlier?" I was scared. "He said if anyone found out, it'd be my word against his. And he has connections." I exhaled slowly. "What exactly did he do?" Sarah lifted her fear-filled eyes to mine. "I don't know. I heard them arguing. Miriam was shouting that she wouldn't stay silent anymore, that the garden would speak for her. Then it went quiet. I was too scared to go out. When I finally did, she was already lying there." I let out a slow breath. The picture was coming together, but not entirely. Dr. Brooks wasn't the only player in this story, and Sarah was more of a pawn than a queen. I glanced at Max. "We need to talk to the doctor," I said. Max nodded. As we walked back to the car, the garden along the road seemed to watch us. And I felt it. The worst was still ahead. Because in every garden, it's not just flowers that grow. In every garden, there are roots. And some of them run too deep. Dr. Brooks received us in his office sterile white walls, the smell of disinfectant, and a heavy chair that swallowed you like a trap. He looked tired. His hair was disheveled, his tie loosened. A man used to keeping the world under control, now clearly losing his footing. I didn't waste time. "Dr. Brooks," I said calmly, "we found Jonathan Hunter's body." He flinched, but quickly composed himself. And someone heard your argument with Miriam the day she died," I continued. "What was it about?" He stayed silent, his gaze stubbornly fixed on the window. Max noisily flipped pages in his notebook. "You knew Miriam was about to reveal the truth. About the business you ran with Jonathan. About the land bought with other people's money." The silence grew heavy. I slowly approached the desk. "You weren't afraid for her. You were afraid for yourself." Brooks lifted his eyes, and I saw in them something I'd seen in people like him before. Not guilt, but exhaustion from his own lies. "It was an accident," he said hoarsely. I grabbed her arm when she started yelling. I wanted to stop her. She stumbled. "And you let it look like a fall?" I clarified. He buried his face in his hands. "I thought if the truth came out, everything would collapse. My practice, my life." "And her life?" Max asked sharply. Brooks didn't answer. I turned to the window. Outside, a light rain had begun. Wet droplets gathered on the glass, blurring the outlines of the world. "Miriam's garden spoke for her when she couldn't speak herself," I said quietly. "And now it's told us everything." When we stepped outside, the rain intensified. Max pulled up his hood. "You know," he said, "sometimes I think the truth is like a weed. You can try to pull it out, burn it, bury it, but it'll grow back." I smiled through the rain. And that's a good thing. We stood on the path leading from Brooks's house to the car. The wet earth beneath our feet smelled of life and death at once. "What now?" Max asked. I glanced back at the hunter's garden, distant, lost in the rainy haze. "Now we close the case, and the garden can be just a garden again. Only those who lived here will remember what was once buried beneath its roots more than just seeds." We got into the car. The radio whispered something calm, unobtrusive a melody, without words. And as the raindrops drew their maps on the windows, I thought, the most important thing in a garden isn't what you see on the surface. It's what grows beneath. Let me know if you like any adjustments or further refinements.
The whisper of the mines. I don't often get invited to places where the air smells of sand, rust, and money. Jefferson Hills was exactly that kind of town. A small mining community in the Southwest where the asphalt melts by 10 in the morning and the bartender knows every local's name and their secrets, especially their secrets. Max and I rolled in at dawn. He was, as usual, groggy and skeptical. I had a cup of stale gas station coffee in hand, its bitterness matching my mood as I braced myself to dig into someone else's skeletons again. "You sure this is worth it?" Max asked as we stepped out of the car. "Officially, there's not even a crime here. If I waited for a body with a kill me sign every time, we'd still be stuck in the archives, Max." He sighed, his gaze catching on an old building across the street. Above the entrance hung a faded sign, "Henderson Mining Company Est, 1954, gold," or what was left of it. Walter Henderson, a billionaire with dirt under his nails and a past as a miner, had died 2 nights ago. Official cause of death, heart attack. But a neighbor, a Mrs. Mabel Brooks, claimed he'd been murdered. The police ignored her. We didn't. Henderson lived in a mansion on the edge of town, a former administrative building that had long ceased to be just a house. Security guards, cameras, gates, everything you'd expect if you were an aging paranoiac with bags of cash and a rotten reputation, or if you held a map to a lost mine that was, according to rumors, cursed. When the guard opened the gate, he looked at us like we were tabloid reporters sniffing for a scoop. I flashed my IDAN a bit of charm. "Alex Riley, private investigator. This is my partner, Officer Max. We're here at Mrs. Brooks's request." He muttered something about that old hag and her fantasies, but let us through. Guess he figured we'd keep her quiet. Henderson's house was eerily silent. No dogs, no hum of machinery, just heat and dust. We were met by his son, Garrett. Mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of guy who's used to being listened to. "You're wasting your time," he said, not bothering to invite us inside. "Dad had heart problems. It was natural. I don't get why anyone's poking around." "Don't you want to be sure it was natural?" Max asked gently. Garrett eyed us, weighing whether we were worth his time. Then he shrugged and opened the door. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and aged leather. The walls were lined with photos of mines, men in hard hats, and Walter Henderson through the years, from a young man with a pickaxe to an old one with a glass of whiskey. Garrett led us to the study. A large desk, a safe, a fireplace, an old-fashioned globe. I noticed a book lying apart from the others. The History of Gold Veins in North America. "Did your dad ever show anyone a map?" I asked. That's nonsense. Sure, he had his theories, but he hesitated, and that caught my attention. He was getting old. His memory was slipping. Kept saying he found an old mine back in the day, but couldn't tell anyone. Why not? Because he believed it was cursed. Seriously. He even wrote that in some kind of diary, like a will. I haven't found it yet. Maybe it's crazy, maybe not. I nodded. Max scribbled in his notebook, though he usually does that to distract himself from awkward silences. When did you last see him? 3 days ago. He was in a good mood, even planning to have someone over. I left, and the next day got the call. He was gone. Who found the body? The housekeeper. She quit right after. Said she got spooked. Now she's off the grid. Convenient, Max muttered. Garrett gave a curt nod. When we stepped outside, the sun was already scorching. Max grabbed a water bottle and leaned against the car hood. Honest, Alex, this is all just legends. Curses, maps, mindset sounds like a movie. And what kills people more often, Max a gun or a legend they believe in? Well said. Scarily well said. I smirked, then pulled out my phone and dialed Mrs. Brooks. She lived next door to the mansion, in a house with a porch and a rocking chair. She greeted us in an apron, her face etched with distrust for the world. I knew they'd kill him, she said. He told me he'd found gold. Said straight to my face, Mabel, if I did, won't be my heart. Who visited him? I asked. The day before he deed, a man in glasses and a hat. Not from around here. Left after an hour. Later he was arguing with someone on the phone. I heard through the window, a woman's voice shrill. A journalist? Max suggested. Maybe. Or worse. I asked if she'd ever seen anyone with the map. Mabel shook her head, then froze. Although I once saw him poking around in the fireplace, hiding something behind a brick. We returned to the mansion that evening, after the guards had changed shifts. Garrett was gone. We worked the new guard quickly, a bit of charm, a bit of cash, and a lot of Max suddenly talking like a prosecutor. I slipped off my gloves and reached into the fireplace. Found it, an old box, a yellowed envelope, inside a piece of a map, not the whole thing, just a fragment, marked shaft number 17, closed 1972, entrance hazardous, and a note, shaky handwriting but legible. If you're reading this, I'm gone. The mine is real, but it will only bring death. Let it burn with me. Signed, Witch. Max reread it silently, then said, You think someone found this before us? I think we're officially not on vacation anymore. I stepped outside. The first stars were lighting up over the town, but the air still felt thick, like spilled oil. The heat wouldn't let up. Nor would the feeling that this mine had already burned someone to ash. The next morning, we ate breakfast at a local diner. I had eggs and bacon. Max poked at a pancake like it might hold evidence. Outside of dust, an old Chevy, and a woman in a cowboy hat smoking by a mailbox. The town lived its rusty life. You know what's bugging me? I said, eyes on my mug. That your coffee's more chemical than a lab? Henderson didn't trust anyone. If he hid the map, there's another piece somewhere. And someone knows about it. Maybe they've already found it. Max nodded thoughtfully. You think the journalist or the guy in glasses? Or both. Look, Max, when it comes to gold, people lose their minds. We've already got a missing map, a terrified housekeeper, and an old man who warned he'd be killed. I'd say we've got ourselves a case. Just without a body, evidence, or suspects. No big deal, Max snorted. I pulled out my phone. Cell service in this town was spotty, but I got through to one of my contacts in the private licensing database. Half an hour later, he sent me a list of journalists who'd entered the county in the past 10 days. A name popped up immediately. Cora Blaine, freelancer, writes about lost stories of America. A pseudonym, obviously. I'd use one too if I were out to steal someone's treasure. We tracked her down at the Red Cactus Motel, just off the highway. She opened the door in a white shirt and jeans, a pyrite pendant hanging around her neck. Blonde hair, eyes gray as fresh steel. "You're Alex Riley," she said, not a hint of surprise. "And this must be Max, the cop. I've read about you. You're a journalist. Or a treasure hunter. Both. Sometimes I write, sometimes I hunt, sometimes I write to hunt." "You were at Henderson's before he died," Max said. "What were you looking for?" She didn't bother lying. The truth. I came across an old recording from the 80s. Henderson's voice, talking about shaft number 17. I came to interview him. He brushed me off at first, but a day later he called me back. "Why?" "Said he'd changed his mind. Wanted someone to know the truth. He was odd, on edge. Kept talking about a curse. Said his son couldn't be trusted." I recorded the conversation. "Can we hear it?" I asked. She played the audio, Henderson's voice gravelly, like an old radio. "If you record this, maybe someone will believe me. I'm not crazy. Down in that mine, I haven't been there since 1972. I saw things. People disappeared. First Jim, then Bill. I got out. But the gold stayed. And now it feels like it's pulling the dead along with it." The recording cut off. "Who's Jim?" Max asked. I looked into it. James Collins, a worker, went missing in 1972. Officially an accident, but they never found the body. I studied her. "You said he changed his mind. Then he died. What else did he tell you?" "That the map was split in two. One part was with him, the other with—" She trailed off. "With who?" "I don't know. He wouldn't say. Just hinted it was someone he once trusted, now hates." Max let out a low whistle. This is starting to sound like a family drama with a side of treasure hunting. That evening, we went back to Mabel. She was on her porch, watering plants. "You ever hear of shaft number 17? Max asked, skipping pleasantries. "No one's been there in decades," she said. "The entrance collapsed. Henderson always said it breathed, like something lived inside. I thought he was just drunk." "Who else knew about the map?" She shrugged. "Only one person visited him a lot these past few months, Joe Tillman. Old friend, former miner, lives out by the dry creek in a trailer." We found Joe's trailer easily. But Joe wasn't answering. The door was ajar. Inside, it smelled of smoke and something agrochemical. Max drew his gun. "Alex, something's off." I pushed the door open. The place was a mess, like someone had torn through it, not caring about the noise, and on the floor body, a man, his face covered in burns, eyes open, dead for hours. "He was holding something," Max said, crouching. "Burned paper? Part of the map?" I stepped over to the table. Amid the clutter and cigarette butts a mug, white residue at the bottom. I touched itacoline dust. "Poison?" "This is murder," Max said, not looking at me. "Of course. And it won't be the last." On the wall nearby, a boot print like someone had kicked the door, and by the stove, a thin piece of plastic. I picked it up. Access card, private security, initial G. "Garrett?" Max raised an eyebrow. "Maybe. Or someone using his card. We need to check." We stepped outside. The sky had darkened. The hum of the tone even, a small one like Jefferson Hill's faded. All that remained was silence, and a dead man in a trailer clutching a torn piece of a map. Now the killer has almost the whole map, I said. Just one piece left, and us. Max stared into the darkness. You think this is all about the gold? I shrugged. Sometimes people kill for money. Sometimes to keep others from finding what they've lost. We need to figure out what this mine is really about. The next day, we got a report from the lab. Traces of digoxin in Joe Tillman's mug, a cardiac poison. Quiet, clean, no mess. Perfect for a natural death. Max slid a photo across to me, a security camera at the motel. The night before Joe's death, a woman in a hat visited him. The same journalist. Cora Blaine. I cursed under my breath. She seemed so genuine. This would be too easy. Or too smart, Max said. Time to find out who she really is. When people start dying in a town, people, no one even remembered yesterday, I get twitchy. Not because it's rare, because it usually means someone's working hard to keep us in the dark. And we were about to shine a light. Max and I stood outside Joel Tillman's trailer, the wind stirring the dry dust at our feet like it was whispering. No turning back. I held the photo from the camera, a woman in a hat, face obscured, but her gait, her silhouette, the details all pointed to Cora Blaine. Our journalist had lied. Either she came to Tillman that night and he died after, or she didn't and someone wanted us to think she did. What's the plan? Max asked, lighting a cigarette. He always smokes when he knows we're in deep. 2 options, I said. 1, find Cora and lean on her. 2, find the mine. One of those paths will lead us to the killer. What if both do? Then we're just one step closer to a grave. Cora was gone. Checked out of the motel overnight, door left open. No belongings, no trace. Just a note, scribbled in a rush. I'm not guilty. They're after me. They're listening. Don't trust Garrett. He's lying. On the back a pencil sketch. A circle, a cross, 3 lines. Max turned it over a few times. What is this, a map? Or a fragment of one? Maybe she found the second piece. I took the envelope and pieced together the map fragment from the fireplace with the one she'd sketched. They almost fit, but a final section was missing. The one that, rumor had it, marked the entrance. You think she's alive? If she's not an idiot, yeah. But Max, if she's really involved, she might be next. If not, she's just the next one in someone's way. That evening, we headed east of town. Old mining trails, abandoned rigs, tire tracks in the sand. The spot on the map was marked as number .17, the same shaft where, according to Henderson, it all began. We arrived as the sun dipped below the horizon. The orange-red light made the landscape look like Mars. Only instead of aliens, it was me, Max, and a rusted container tipped on its side at the base of a hill. This used to be a drilling site, Max said, looking around. See? Foundation remnants, an old cistern, and that sign. He pointed to a plaque half buried in the sand. I pulled it up. Danger, restricted area, cave, ends. Dated 1973. Convincing, I said. But we're not the type to follow rules. Especially you, Max muttered, switching on his flashlight. The mine entrance was behind a pile of debris. Someone had clearly tried to seal its stones, metal sheets, wire, but one section had been moved. Recently. Someone's been here, Max said, or they're still inside. We climbed in. The air smelled of damp earth, mold, and something metallic. The shaft was narrow like the neck of a bottle. Our flashlights cut through the dark but didn't dispel it. Sand crunched underfoot, protesting our intrusion. 20 yards in, we stumbled on the remnants of a camp. A flashlight, an empty water bottle, a tin can. Someone had been here for over an hour, and someone had left tracks clear, fresh. One person, average height. They came back out, so alive. Or dead. Just the legs kept walking. Max grumbled. I turned a corner and froze. Ahead was a drop, not just a PETA full-on abyss. Beneath it, darkness. But something glinted at the edge. Max reached it first. A chain. With a pendant. Pyrite. Cora, I breathed. On the wall nearby, someone had scrawled in charcoal. They're close. The mine isn't dead. Someone's losing it, Max said. Or their conscience is. We emerged as the sky turned black. Stars spilled out like bullets in a chamber. I sat on a rock and lit a cigarette. Max sat beside me, silent. For 5 minutes, we just stared into the desert. You know what scares me? He finally asked. What? That this mine might be real. That Henderson wasn't lying. That there's something alive down there. Or at least dangerous. I flicked my cigarette away. It's not a curse, Max. It's just people. Greedy, scared, and willing to do anything. The curse here is their choices. The next day, we returned to town. I decided to pay Garrett another visit. He met us on the porch, in a fresh suit, smiling like he had everything under control. You're digging deeper than you need to, he said. The mine's just a myth. And Joe Tillman? He a myth too? Joe was old, sick, drank too much. Probably did it to himself. What about Cora Blaine? She vanished. After meeting you. He froze. Just for a second. But it was enough. She was weird, obsessed. I told her to stay away. She had issues. What kind? He shrugged. Mental ones. At least that's what Dad said. He banned her from coming around. Said she reminded him of a past that should stay buried. Interesting phrasing. Max stepped closer. You recognize this access card? He showed the fragment with the initial G. Garrett glanced at it and scoffed. Not mine. Looks like one the security team uses. I haven't carried one in years. And anyway, I inherited property, not delusions. I'm not chasing gold that might not even exist. I didn't buy it. But arguing was pointless. He knew something. Maybe he even knew where the third piece of the map was. Or he'd already burned it. We left and Max said, he's lying. Of course, but not about the right thing. Or maybe too much about the right thing. Now what? Now we check Henderson's laptop. Yeah, I hadn't mentioned this earlier. In Henderson's study, hidden among the old books, was a laptop, password protected. But old guys don't usually get fancy with security. I guessed the password. The company's founding date, 1954. It worked. Files, videos, recordings. Among Themen labeled, Letter to Myself. We hit play. On the screen, Henderson. Elderly, gray eyes, sitting in front of the camera. If you're watching this, I'm dead. Someone got to me. Shaft number. 17 is real. There's gold down there, but it costs more than you think. It took people. Took a friend. I thought I could keep a secret. But it keeps coming up, like sand through your fingers. If you're after the truth, watch out for Garrett. He's not who he seems. He remembers what happened in 1972. He was there. He's still there, just in a different form. Max cursed. Damn. So he was in the mine? In 1972? He was 12. But he clearly remembers. And Henderson knew he did. Maybe even knew he was hiding something. I opened another video. Grainy footage. The mine. Screams. A shadow. Then Henderson's voice. He killed Jim. I couldn't stop it. We exchanged a look. Now we had more than hunches. We had a motive. A past Garrett was hiding behind suits and smiles. And a mind that might still hold the last piece of the truth. Or bodies. Max looked at me. Ready? Never. But that's never stopped us, has it? He smiled. For a moment, it felt like we were just two idiots playing Poirot and Hastings against the backdrop of dusty America. Then I remembered Cora's chain, Joe's body, the maps torn by time. And I knew, whatever was in that mine, we'd have to see it for ourselves. I've seen plenty in my line of work. Lies, panic, victim acts, and dramatic breakdowns. But there's one thing you can't mistake for anything else fear. Real, raw, unfiltered fear. The kind I saw in Cora's eyes when we found her. Or rather, when she found us. It happened 2 days after we'd come back from the mine. Max and I were sitting in a cheap pizzeria, trading silence and suspicions when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered, Alex Riley? A woman's voice. Hoarse. Tense. Cora? Don't say my name. They're listening. I can meet, but on my terms. Tell me. Outside town, Old Cactus Haven, motel, room 3, half an hour, come alone. If I see a cop, I'm gone. I hung up and looked at Max. She's alive. Well, that's one piece of good news out of 3. The others? She's scared. Wants to meet? Without you? Classic. Next thing, they find you in a ditch with your throat slit and your phone in your hand. Then you'll finally get to say, I told you so. He grinned. I'm coming anyway. I'll stay outside. As usual. My shadow with a gun. The motel was worse than I expected. Run-down bungalows, a dusty office window, a flickering neon sign that read vacancy. For the 4th night in a row, I felt like I was living in a movie where the soundtrack was written with drums on my nerves. I walked up to room 3 and knocked. Softly. Twice. The door cracked open. A sliver of darkness. Then a voice. Alone? Alone. A click. The lock turned, and she let me in. Cora looked rougher than I remembered. Pale, hair, a mess, no makeup. She held a gun, pointed at the floor, but her finger hovered near the trigger. Don't come closer, she said. Wasn't planning to, just here to listen. She shut the door and backed against the wall, eyeing me like I was part of some conspiracy. Someone's after me. I can feel it. They know everything. Garrett, he's hiding something. But he's not alone. There's someone else. Someone doing the dirty work. Cora, let's take it step by step. Where have you been the last 2 days? Hiding. In a trailer a friend of mine rented. He's off fishing, and I just stayed there. Last night, the trailer burned down. Completely. I barely got out through the window. Someone wanted me gone. I pulled out the note she'd left at the motel before disappearing and showed it to her. You wrote this? She nodded. I didn't know who to trust. But you're different. You're not like the others. You're not after gold, you're after the truth. And you? I came here because of my father. I tensed. What? Jim Collins, the one who disappeared in the mine in 1972. He was my dad. The silence hung between us like smoke. I tried to process it. Why didn't you say so from the start? Because no one would have believed me. Because he was listed as unattached. No heirs. I was born after from his common law wife. He went to the mine and vanished. Mom always said Henderson was hiding something. You want to find the gold? I want to find him, or at least understand why he died. I sat on the edge of the bed. Cora, did anyone know you were connected to Collins? Only Joe Tillman. He knew my dad. He's the one who told me Henderson had found the mine. I met with him, asked where the entrance was. He was alive when I left. I swear. After that, he was killed. She froze. You think I did it? I think you're the key, not to the gold, to why this all started. 20 minutes later, the three of us were driving me, Max and Cora. She sat in the back, head down, like she was on her way to confession. Max still didn't trust her. I almost didn't either. But something in her story didn't fit the profile of a killer. Yet it fit perfectly as a motive. The daughter of a miner who vanished in a cursed shaft, where now people were dying. This wasn't a legend anymore. This was a family reckoning. Where are we going? Max asked. I remembered an old recording, I said. It wasn't on the laptop, but it was mentioned in Henderson's journal. He kept a diary on tape-sold VHS at Mabel's place. Does Mabel know about the tape? Number, but she's got an old player and a box of Walter's things. Mabel wasn't thrilled about our late-night visit, but when she saw Cora, she paled. She recognized her, stared for a long moment, then let us in without a word. You're that girl, she said. I remember. Your mom came by, years ago, begged Walter to admit Jim didn't just disappear. What did he say? Nothing. He stayed quiet, like always when he was scared. We found the box quickly, dusty, filled with tapes and old papers. We popped in the first one. The tape hissed. A frame appeared. Henderson. Young, dirty, hands shaking. Bill died today. That's the second one. We went down to level 4. Thena flash. Some kind of gas? I don't know. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Jim's not responding. I hear rustling. I swear someone was there. The next scene shaky footage. Inside the mine, suddenly a silhouette in black walking toward the camera. The camera drops. Static. A noise. End of tape. Who was that? Cora whispered. I shook my head. I think it's the same person who burned Joe's camp. The one who's after you. Someone who knows the mine better than we do. A double, Max said. Someone pretending to be someone else. The next morning, we got a call from the police. A remote spot outside town. A fire. A charred van. And inside a body. We drove out. The sand still smoked. The body was burned almost beyond recognition, but nearby a scorched jacket. It had a distinct button, silver, engraved. Guy H. Garrett Henderson. No way, Max breathed. We saw him yesterday, in person. I crouched by the remains. The body belonged to a man, judging by the build. But one detail stood out on the neck, a tattoo. Nothing like what Garrett had in his photos. Max, this isn't him, it's a decoy. What? Someone's been posing as Garrett, using his clothes to throw us off, while the real Garrett is either dead or playing a whole different game, Max finished. We exchanged a look. Cora stood off to the side, hand over her mouth. So someone's already hunting, and they're a pro. I picked up a piece of plastic from the ground, a burned access card, barely legible, but part of a name was visible. M.H. I stood slowly. Max. How many kids did Henderson have? One. Garrett. What if he had another? He froze. You think? I think Jim Collins had an enemy. I think Henderson knew it, and someone else was in that mine. Someone who didn't die, who came back, who's now trying to erase everyone tied to the past. Max was silent for a long moment. And you think we're next? I think we already are. I've always said, if you want the truth, be ready for it to hit you in the face. Sometimes with a fist, sometimes with an explosion. This time, it was the latter. After finding the burned decoy in Garrett's jacket with a piece of an access card, something clicked in my head. Someone was playing both sides. Someone was pretending to be Garrett. Someone was framing Cora. And someone wanted this over quickly, cleanly, on paper. But we're not paper. We decided to go back to the mine. Yes, at night. Yes, again. Yes, it was reckless. But I had a gut feeling time was against us. That every minute, someone down there was burying another lead, burning evidence, or setting a trap. We were driving down a back road when Max said, "We're heading into a killer's den. No warrant, no backup, and with a girl we still can't fully clear. You good?" "No, Max. But luckily, we're not here to do things the good way. We're here to do them right." He snorted and checked his gun. I checked my flashlight. Cora stayed silent. She had the look of someone walking into a place where they'd once lost themselves. We found the mine entrance quickly. Too quickly. Someone had cleared it. Stones moved. Wire cut. And inside fresh tracks. "Someone's here." Or was, Max said, stepping forward, gun at his hip. Cora stayed close to me, her hand trembling. She wasn't afraid of the dark, she was afraid of finding an answer she wasn't ready for. We went in. This time, it felt different. The flashlight beams glinted off something metallic. I approached. An old metal box. Empty, nearby a shovel, and on the wall graffiti. Not old, but fresh. Bright red paint, still wet. "They will all die underground." "This isn't just obsession anymore," Max said. "This is a manifesto." We went another 20 yards. On the ground broken wood. An old door kicked in. And a strange smell. Burned plastic. Something chemical. "Back," I shouted. Too late. The explosion was muffled, like the earth coughing. The ceiling shook. Dust hit my face. Rocks rained down. Max was thrown back, Cora to the side. I dropped to my knees, pressing against the wall. A rumble. Then silence. Then Cora's rasping voice. Alex." I crawled to her. Alive. Scratched up. But okay. "Max?" A second later, he emerged from the dust cloud. Shirt torn, blood on his brow, but alive. "Someone knew we'd come," he hissed. "That was a mine. Or a charge." I looked around. The narrow passage behind us blocked. No way out. "We're trapped?" "Almost." I pointed ahead. "Unless we find another exit." We walked through the lower levels for 20 minutes. The flashlights flickered weakly, Cora's hand shook, and Max kept stopping to listen. Thina sound. Metal on metal, footsteps. "Someone's coming," he whispered. "One person." We hid behind a support beam. I pulled Cora close. Max took the other side. A moment later, a figure stepped around the corner. A man. Black clothes, a flashlight, no mask, around 40. Scars on his face, quiet as a shadow. I didn't think. I lunged. We hit the ground. He fought like a pro quick, sharp. But Max got there first, pinned him with a knee, gun aimed. Who are you? He spat blood. You're already dead, all of you. Shouldn't have come back. Who sent you? Silence. Max struck him. The man laughed. A raspy sound. No one. I came myself. I've been waiting too long. Waiting for what? For them to come back. For it to happen again. He suddenly slammed his fist into his chest. A click. I tore his shirt open about with a detonator. Max. A second. And? Nothing. Dud, Max exhaled. He wanted to scare us. But that meant one thing. He was ready to die. Which meant his convictions ran deeper than money. Who are you? Cora asked softly. He looked at her and froze. You're her daughter. Whose? Clarissa's. She was with Jim. I knew her. And you're the one. He coughed, then added hoarsely, your father didn't die in a cave-in. He was killed for wanting to leave. Henderson was scared. Scared Jim would talk about the mine. He killed him? Number he ordered it. And Garrett was a kid then. But he saw, then forgot, or made himself forget. And you? He gave a bitter smile. I buried the body. We left him tied up and kept moving. 10 minutes later, we found an old emergency tunnel. With effort, lungs full of dust, we made it out. Outside night, a clear starry sky, and a silence that made you want to scream. Max wiped his face. We almost died. Welcome to my life, I said, glancing at Cora. She stood off to the side. Tears. Real ones. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know it was this. Your dad wanted to leave. That tells me he was a good man, I said. That's what matters. Back in town, we headed straight to the station. Max uploaded the data, ran the access card, a match. Name, Martin Hale, former Henderson mining security guard, fired in 1990, involved in the 1972 incident. There's our mine fanatic, Max said. But not the killer, I added. He's barely tied to the recent deaths. He's just a link. Someone else is pulling the strings. Garrett? Or someone pretending to be him. Or someone we haven't seen yet. Max sighed. What now? I lit a cigarette. We round up everyone left who's connected to this, and do what I do best. An unmasking. Some clues scream, some whisper, some stay silent like the dead, but even the dead have something to say, especially if you look under their nails. Morning started with coffee and reports. Max sat at the computer, combing through a list of everyone ever connected to shaft number 17. The list was longer than we'd hoped. Old guards, former drillers, engineers, archivists, and almost everyone had either a stroke, a disappearance, or an early death. Something was definitely in that mine. The question was what? Cora sat in the corner, wrapped in a blanket. No makeup, no pretense. Now she was just a person who lost her father and found too much truth. I stared into my empty mug, thinking about Martin Hale. We left him under police watch. But his words, I buried the body, still haunted me. And his voice trembled not from fear, from regret. I also thought about the body in the van burned, but wearing Garrett's jacket. And a phrase I'd almost missed that day, "You're her daughter." It was said with pain, not accusation. That meant someone knew Cora long before she showed up, which meant this story started much earlier than we thought. Everything changed when they brought a body to the station from the morgue. Male, around 50, found in the desert near an old quarry. The police assumed he was a drifter, but the report had an odd detail. Under the right hand fingernail, a piece of paper lodged in the skin. "What's this?" Max asked. "A surprise," I said. We examined the body. Sure enough, under the nail was a tiny, charred, but legible scrap. I took tweezers, carefully pulled it out, and held it under the lamp. Words written in a shaky hand. "They're coming. The map is with the woman. Don't trust." It cut off there. Max cursed quietly. He was trying to warn someone, but who? Maybe us. Maybe Cora. I turned to her. She stared at the paper like it was a death sentence. "I didn't know he was alive. I thought," her voice broke, "that was Jerry, my dad's friend. He looked after Mom, after Dad disappeared. Then he left, for good. He came back to say something and died." Max frowned. What if he didn't die by accident? What if someone planted him there so we wouldn't find out in time? I nodded. It's all coming together. Someone systematically eliminating everyone who knows the truth. Someone who really doesn't want that truth to reach the living. We called everyone in. This wasn't a trial or a show. It was a reckoning, minor style, rough in an old hangar near the abandoned Henderson Mining Company admin building. Not everyone showed. Some couldn't, some wouldn't, some were already in the ground. But in the room were those who knew. Garrett Henderson, alive and well, surprisingly. Cora Blaine, Martin Hale under guard, and Becky Lawson Henderson's former nurse, and incidentally, his mistress in his final years. Max and I stood in the center. I started, "This story began with a map, a so-called lost mine, but really it began with betrayal. Jim Collins Cora's father knew the truth. He knew shaft number. 17 wasn't just a mine. There were experiments down there, not just a cave-in, but a deliberate explosion to cover up a crime." Garrett snorted. "And you're going to prove all this, of course?" I pulled out a tablet, played the video, the clip from Henderson's camera where you hear screams. Then, "He killed Jim." I couldn't stop it. "He was talking about you, Garrett." "I was 12, he shouted. "You serious?" "Exactly. And you were at the mine. You knew. You saw Henderson give the order. Or maybe you saw someone carry it out." I scanned the others. "Martin?" Hale stayed silent. "Becky?" I just treated his wounds," she said. "He'd come at night, said his hands were covered in blood, but I thought it was just a figure of speech." Max stepped forward, and we found the map, the full one, on a guard killed at a motel a week ago, and it had your fingerprint on it, Garrett. He froze. I'm not involved. That's a setup." "Maybe, but here's the thing," I said, pulling out a photo. "There's a little detail. The photo, the burned jacket, the body in the van, and a close-up of the tattoo. That tattoo belonged to Rick Henley, your bodyguard. His DNA matched the body, which means you're alive, and he's dead. That's not. You used him to disappear, wanted everyone to think you were dead, then slip into the shadows and take the gold." "That's insane." Insane is killing people over a mine that doesn't even have gold anymore. A heavy pause, like a slab of stone. Cora stood. Did you kill my father? Garrett met her eyes, and for the first time, he didn't answer. Silence is an answer too. When they took him away, he didn't scream. He just looked at me, calmly, almost with respect. You're not just a cop. I'm not a cop. I'm the guy who doesn't close a case until I know the whole truth. He smirked. You sure you're not a Henderson? Later, Max and I sat at an old bar in the center of town. He drank whiskey. I had lemon water. Cora was gone. She said she wanted to head east, start fresh. I don't believe in clean slates. Everyone's got marks. But sometimes, those marks are what keep us alive. Max said, I thought this would be a story about gold. Turns out it was about fear. Fear, memory, the fact that the dead don't stay silent. You just have to know how to listen. Night settled over the town, and we stayed where it all began. In a place where the sand whispers, where gold is dust, and the mind is just a mirror. I've always said, the end isn't a period. It's a mirror. It shows you not just the truth, but who you became while chasing it. 3 days had passed since we exposed Garrett Henderson. He sat in custody, silent, refusing statements and lawyers. But I didn't believe it was over. Not because I'm paranoid, because something didn't add up. Cora had disappeared. She'd said she was leaving, but she hadn't. Not at any airport, not on the highway, not at any bus station in the great state of Arizona. Max wasn't surprised. I was. Maybe she just wanted to vanish, he suggested. The girl went through hell, found her dad's killer. Now she wants peace. Not everyone's like you, running back into the mine. Maybe. But I've got a rule. If something feels finished, dig deeper. And what do you suggest? We go back to the mine one more time. You've lost it. Long ago, but you're still coming. Max rolled his eyes and started gathering flashlights. I don't believe in clean slates. Everyone's got marks. But sometimes, those marks are what keep us alive. Max said, I thought this would be a story about gold. Turns out it was about fear. Fear, memory, the fact that the dead don't stay silent. You just have to know how to listen. Night settled over the town, and we stayed where it all began. In a place where the sand whispers, where gold is dust, and the mind is just a mirror. I've always said, the end isn't a period. It's a mirror. It shows you not just the truth, but who you became while chasing it. 3 days had passed since we exposed Garrett Henderson. He sat in custody, silent, refusing statements and lawyers. But I didn't believe it was over. Not because I'm paranoid, because something didn't add up. Cora had disappeared. She'd said she was leaving, but she hadn't. Not at any airport, not on the highway, not at any bus station in the great state of Arizona. Max wasn't surprised. I was. Maybe she just wanted to vanish, he suggested. The girl went through hell, found her dad's killer. Now she wants peace. Not everyone's like you, running back into the mine. Maybe. But I've got a rule. If something feels finished, dig deeper. And what do you suggest? We go back to the mine one more time. You've lost it. Long ago, but you're still coming. Max rolled his eyes and started gathering flashlights. Since then, she comes in my dreams. The mine, the dust, the scream. Be quiet, Jared. Don't tell. But now they're looking. Riley, Max, the girl. I can't stay silent anymore. I hit pause. Max exhaled slowly. Who's Jared? You know him, Cora said. He works in the archives, Henderson's company, officially a historian, really the company's silent shadow. And then I remembered. The quiet guy who met us at the museum on the first day. Glasses, tablet, mumbling about company policy. I hadn't even written down his name. And he was killing. He knew the whole time. He guarded the maps. He killed Joe. He burned the camp, wanted to take out Garrett. And me? Cora's voice shook. He wanted to end it, so no one would know. Max sat beside her. Where is he now? I don't know. He came here 2 days ago. I hid. He was talking to himself, screaming, crying. Then he left. But I think he'll come back. He always does. I stood, walked to the exit, and said, "We need to stop this. Not for the police. Not for a check mark. For her." Max nodded, shrugged. How? We give him a finale. His style. A day later, we gathered everyone again in the same hangar. Everyone left. I sent the invitation myself. Through the town administration, the wording was simple. Final meeting on the shaft number, 17 case. Attendance mandatory. He came, polite, with a notepad. Same expression, like he was a background character, not the man who killed 3 people. I stood in front of him. Jared, yes? You know they found a body in the mine? He froze. Whose? Jim Collins. Bone fragments, a dental crown. DNA match. We checked. Silence. Then, quietly. And they also found a tape with your confession. Now he looked at me. No fear, no horror, just tired. So, it's over. It's over. Can I say one thing? I nodded. He looked at the room, at Cora, then at me. I didn't mean to. At first, he was good. But if he'd left it, would have all come out. And I wanted things to stay as they were, for the mind to die with the past. But it didn't die. It lives, as long as someone remembers. And now, he smiled, quietly, almost sadly. Now you'll close it, right? Forever. He raised his hands. Max cuffed him. 2 days later, shaft number 17 was sealed, welded shut. The land above it bought out and declared a restricted zone. Max and I stood on a hill, watching them lay the final block. You think he'll repent? Doubt it. And Cora, she said she's staying in town, wants to open a library for history, not the company's, the people's. Max smiled. You know we'll stumble into some new mess in a week, right? Of course. But for now, quiet. We parted ways. The sun rose slowly, like it was afraid to touch this ground. And the mine stayed silent. Forever. There's gold you can touch and gots, coins, glittering veins and rock. And then there's the other kind, the kind people die for without ever seeing. The kind that turns the living into ghosts. The kind that smells not of metal, but of ash. 3 weeks passed. Shaft number 17 was sealed. Officially, due to a technical hazard. Unofficially, because no one wanted to know what was beneath it anymore. Not the town. Not the investors. Not the survivors. I was still in Jefferson Hills. Max had left for a few days to see family. He said, I need to remember people can be normal. Cora stayed. She opened a small bookstore. The sign was simple, voice beneath the ground. I helped hammer in the nails. People will think it's a metaphor, she said. Let them. Only you'll know where the name really comes from. We didn't talk about her father, didn't talk about Jared, about Garrett, about the mine, because those weren't names, they were wounds. I tried to leave. Thought I'd close the case, get in the car, play some old tunes, and drive into the sunset, like the genre demands. But every time I got out of bed, it felt like the sand was gripping my ankles. This town took something, and gave something back. One morning, I woke up in my motel room and realized if I left now, without saying anything, it'd be right. But if I stayed one more day, it'd be human. I stayed. Garrett Henderson stayed behind bars. His crime wasn't murder, it was silence. He knew who killed Jim Collins. Knew the mine wasn't for extraction, but for experiments. And he stayed quiet because it was convenient, because wealth loves silence. He was charged with concealing evidence, falsifying documents, and orchestrating the cover-up of bodies. He'll be in for a long time, not for what he did, for what he allowed. Jared's case was simpler. He faced trial, confessed everything, calmly, no excuses, like he wanted it to be over. Was there gold? The judge asked him. He answered, yes, some. But that's not what killed. People chose what they'd kill for. And me, I stayed another day. And then I stopped by Cora's. She was working in the shop shelving books, dusting. You've got a reader, I said. I'll even sign up for a membership. I've got a memory, she replied. That's more important. I scanned the shelves. On One Miner's helmet, rusty, dented. Why? So no one forgets that gold sometimes comes with blood. That night, I went to the mine, just to stand there. No goal, no report. It was quiet. The smell of sand, the rustle of wind. The moon shone directly on the entrance, now sealed with concrete slabs. Someone had left a lamp nearby, extinguished. I lit it and placed an old coin beside it. One Max had found near the entrance long ago. You wanted gold, Jim? I said aloud. Or just the truth? Back in town, I walked the streets. People lived, baked rolls, mowed lawns, argued about taxes. No one spoke of the mine anymore, not even in whispers. Silence is the best cement for old tragedies. Max returned the next day, smiling a bit more than usual. Still in town? Still. We've got a new case in Denver. Murder with a touch of elegance. Elderly lady. Poisoning at an auction. Sounds good. He looked at me. And this? This'll stay with me, like everything else. As we drove off, I glanced back at Cora's sign. Voice beneath the ground. And realized it wasn't about the mine. It was about those we bury inside ourselves. The voices that won't let us forget. The ones whose truth was buried too deep. But we dug it up, and now we could leave.